This episode is brought to you by Audi. The road is calling. Embrace the thrill of the drive with the all-new, fully electric Audi Q6 e-tron. Featuring effortless power, serious acceleration, and advanced Audi tech. It's not just a new EV. It's a new way to experience driving. The all-new, fully electric Audi Q6 e-tron is here. The next chapter of Audi starts now.
Here at the Almond Joy Factory, where tropical vibes abound, we use soft, fresh-tasting coconut.
The crunchiest almonds and delicious chocolate candy.
Ah, but do you know what our most important ingredient is? Sometimes you feel like a nut.
Sometimes you don't.
Almond Joy's got nuts and something even way better than that. Yes, Almond Joy is made with almonds and joy.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
You're listening to the Animation Addicts Podcast, episode 318. Who the heck is Skydance Animation?
Welcome to the Animation Addicts Podcast with the Rotoscopers, the number one place to get your animation fix with animation addicts just like you. Each episode, we dive into the wonderful world of animation featuring Disney, DreamWorks, Pixar, and everything in between. From hilarious discussions and movie reviews to interviews with industry insiders, this show's mission is to brighten your day through our love of animation. So hop on your nerdy couch, grab some snacks, and get ready to hang out with your animation besties because it's time to dive into today's episode. Hey there, animation addicts. My name is Chelsea Robson.
And I'm Morgan Stradling.
We are going to be jumping into a little bit of a inside baseball episode today and talking about Skydance Productions, Skydance Animation. Who is Skydance? Mm-hmm. What is this whole thing? And
where did you come from?
Where did you come from? Where are you going? Okay, so we're trying to figure this out, and you're coming along for the ride. So saddle up. Let's go.
Whoop, whoop. But before we do, Chelsea, how are you doing?
You know what? Today we are recording this on Halloween, and I decided to be my mother. So I am...
She is her mom for Halloween. She is decked out in all of the cowboy gear. We got tassels, we got beads, we got boots, we got bright pops of red, which is a beautiful color on Chelsea. When I think of Chelsea, I think of red. So she is looking, with red lipstick, I might add, she's looking mighty fine today. You guys are missing out.
I am Sweet Mary for the day. So. How are you, Morgan? Sorry.
I am just me. I am me. I'm doing great. You know, kids are at school, baby's sleeping. Time's a ticking because, if the baby's sleeping, that's when we record. When the baby's up, it's like, okay. So
let's get it.
Imagine what's possible when learning doesn't get in the way of life. At Capella University, our game-changing FlexPath learning format lets you set your own deadlines so you can learn at a time and pace that works for you. It's an education you can tailor to your schedule. That means you don't have to put your life on hold to pursue your professional goals. Instead, enjoy learning your way and earn your degree without missing a beat. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu.
I can say to my new Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra, hey, find a keto-friendly restaurant nearby and text it to Beth and Steve. And it does without me lifting a finger. So I can get in more squats anywhere I can. 1, 2, 3.
Will that be cash or credit?
Credit. 4.
Galaxy S25 Ultra, the AI companion that does the heavy lifting so you can do you. Get yours at Samsung.com. Compatible with select apps. Requires Google Gemini account. Results may vary based on input. Check responses for accuracy.
This episode is brought to you by Walmart. New beauty is in bloom at Walmart, and it's all about springtime radiance. From Drybar, Tula Skincare, and hundreds more available online. Walmart has the premium brands you want and this season's on-trend products for flawless, glossy hair and hydrated skin. Big name beauty brands? Check. The things you love? Check. Find trending spring beauty and all you need to look and feel gorgeous at Walmart, on app and online.
So Skydance Animation is a relatively new animation studio, and they've had one movie come out, Luck, which we're going to be talking about, but they also have another one coming out called Spellbound, which is going to be released November 22nd on Netflix. So I'm actually very interested in this studio because there's a lot of not a lot of history, but there's a lot of notable players at this studio. So I thought, hey, this would be a great time. Let's talk about Skydance Animation, who they are, how they came to be, the who's who, if you will, at Skydance. And then let's discuss their very first theatrical length film, Luck. So, you might, when you think of Skydance Animation, if you're like me, it seems like Skydance just sort of appeared out of nowhere in the past few years. And the only reason I knew about it was when John Lasseter was fired, was let go at Disney, Pixar, and then announced a few months later, he's at Skydance. And I thought, what is Skydance? I had never heard of them before.
What is this?
What is this? What is this? And at the time, Skydance had not put anything out. Now they did a short that came out and they did Luck, but at the time, they were the studio that existed, but they really hadn't done anything. So it was like, okay, here you go. You're at basically something starting fresh, which is interesting because I think John Lasseter could have gone two ways. He could have started his own studio entirely, Pixar 2.0. He could have joined a burgeoning new studio, which is Skydance, or he could have joined an incredibly established studio, for example, DreamWorks, Illumination. There's different pros and cons with each one of those, especially when you are the head honcho or used to being. You're kind of the creative guy, the creative genius, if you will. So anyways, this isn't the John Lasseter show. We really want to talk about Skydance Animation. So we need to go way back in time. Get in your time machine. We're going back to 2006. 2006 was when Skydance Productions was established by David Ellison, who is the son of Oracle co-founder Larry Ellison. And they wanted to just produce high-quality films and TV content. And so they existed for a little while. They released a few films. In 2009, they entered a 5-year partnership with Paramount Pictures to co-produce and to co-finance films. And then they ended up re-signing this deal 2 different times through 2021. So this ended up being a great partnership with Paramount Pictures. In 2010 is when they, from what I can glean, it seems like they changed the name from Skydance Productions to Skydance Media in around 2010. But don't quote me on that. The internet was not my friend today as I was doing all of this research. And then we're just talking about Skydance in general right now, just like the history of the Skydance Media before we talk about their sub studio, which is Skydance Animation. So in July 7th, 2024, they announced they were going to merge with Paramount Global in an $8 billion deal. And at first when I read this, I was like, what? At first, initially it was they were wanting to buy out Paramount Global. And I'm like, who is Skydance? Skydance is able to buy out Paramount? What on earth is happening? $8 billion. And then it ended up where they just decided, okay, we're going to do a merger. And Skydance would acquire Paramount's privately held controller shareholder, which was called National Amusements. It's one of their big investors. So Paramount, Skydance took them over. And then it was an all-stock merger. So this is expected to be complete in spring 2025. But Skydance Media is a lot bigger of a name than I thought. It's someone you knew but you didn't know. So here's some of the films that they have produced of note. Obviously, there's a lot more than this, but 2006, Flyboys, that was their first one. Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol in 2011. Jack Reacher in 2012, along with all of the variation of the Jack Reacher films. G.I. Joe Retaliation in 2013. Star Trek Into the Darkness 2013. World War Z 2013. Terminator Genesis 2015. Another Mission Impossible, Rogue Nation this time. 2015. And then we have Star Trek Beyond 2016, Baywatch 2017. I'm like, wow, Baywatch came out in 2017. I feel like that just came out a few years ago.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Geostorm 2017, Mission Impossible Fallout 2018, Terminator Dark Fate 2019, Top Gun Maverick 2022, followed a few months later by Luck 2022, and then Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. So they're kind of the studio that took over the Mission Impossible series. Yeah. Starting in Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, which I believe was directed by Brad Bird. And from that point on, they're kind of the production studio behind Mission Impossible, which we know is this huge behemoth. Obviously, they have done 4 Mission Impossible movies. This is just their live action slate. So they have gotten their hands on some pretty big films. There's a lot of smaller ones that I didn't even mention, but they're a big heavy hitter, enough so that they're able to do
Top
this.
Gun Maverick really helped. So
that saved cinema. I mean, remember, there had not been a movie that really had... I mean, there was the Spider-Man not Into the Spider-Verse, but the live action Spider-Man in December that really had done over $1 billion. But I mean, this was the one that just like blew it out of the water.
Mm-hmm. And just such a smaller, by smaller, I just mean it wasn't Marvel, and it wasn't like they hadn't been doing Top Gun since, the original. And so to come out with this other one, and even Tom Cruise having had all of these other Mission Impossible things, yes, they've had, so he's been around. So he's definitely been a favorite of them. But I'm just, wow. I mean, you're right in that they are everywhere without being known.
Yeah, definitely. So now let's talk about Skydance Animation. So Skydance Media in March 2017, they formed a multi-year partnership with a Madrid-based animation studio called Ilion Animation Studios, or Ilion Animation Studios. And so this is kind of common with a lot of production companies and big studios, where eventually they hit their stride and they want to branch out. And a big thing, especially around 2017, that was kind of the heyday of like everyone having an animation studio, is let's go do animation. So they did that. And then officially in 2019, this was right after John Lasseter came on board, they decided to rebrand as Skydance Animation. And this studio, which they had partnered with, now became absorbed. They bought the studio out, and now they became a part of Skydance Animation. So that studio is called Skydance Animation Madrid. Then they have an LA and a Connecticut offices. That's great. The studio's great. They've basically started in 2017, but really hadn't been able to get anything off the ground until 2022. And it wasn't until... So they initially in 2017, Bill Damashk, which I'm probably butchering your name, October 2017, he was hired as the president of animation and family entertainment. Now, he has a long history as a producer in animation. He was starting his career as a production office assistant for Pocahontas in 1995, and then quickly moved over to DreamWorks Land, with Prince of Egypt, El Dorado as like co-producers, production managers. Finally, Shark Tale was his first big producer gig, Over the Hedge, Kung Fu Panda. And then, Shrek the Musical, he ended up being a producer on that, which, hey, it's great to get into the musical realm, which we just talked about in our last episode. But he'd been working and eventually moved over in 2017 to be the head of the studio. And then they had some other people brought on to direct Luck, Alessandro Carloni, and he was ultimately replaced by Peggy Holmes for Luck. But let's just talk about the John Lasseter of it all. So, I mean, there's the people before the John Lasseter era, and then the people after. So, obviously, when John Lasseter came in January 2019, he was hired as head of animation. Basically, the creative guy was going to take over everything. And so what typically happens, and this isn't just in animation, but this is in any company, and like the new guy comes in and he starts saying, hey, this is working, this isn't, this is working, this isn't. And hey, you know what? I know someone I've worked with in the past who'd be really good for this role. You might be okay, but I like this person better. So I mean, this is so common. It's like you can get, I've actually been a part of this where I was doing absolutely phenomenal in my role and had like the best year ever out of 5 years, but yet it was deemed that I was not one of their people. And so, they brought other people in and the rest is history. So this is totally normal. And this is what John Lasseter does. And he starts reworking the film. And, like I said, the director of Luck was initially Alessandro Carloni.
That's a name we know.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just looking at the list that you have in here and I'm just like, man, there's a lot of names that I know from Disney fame.
Yeah, Alessandro Carloni, he was most known for being co-director of Kung Fu Panda 3, and unfortunately it just didn't really work out with him, and so Peggy Holmes was tasked to take over Luck. And then with that, we started hearing trickles. There were two things that happened during this time. Once John Lasseter was announced, there was a departure of key people who announced that they were leaving.
Makes sense. So as far as sources go, a lot of the sourcing is coming from Wikipedia and other sources.
News articles, but mainly Wikipedia. But so, obviously there were people who were just in the studio, not necessarily a producer or a director or whatnot, who were just really upset about this and ended up, leaving, or they were just expressing their disapproval. Right. But a big name, Emma Thompson, she was supposed to voice a character in Luck, but then left the project, specifically because Lasseter was hired. And then, conveniently thereafter, it was announced that Jane Fonda was cast as the dragon in Luck, which makes me think that Emma Thompson was the dragon.
Which is kind of weird.
Yeah.
Okay.
But for the most part, there wasn't this like mass. There were like people online, like the terminally online people, the Lasseter haters who were just going off on this. I remember this era of just people losing their mind. Mm-hmm. But then there was people who worked in animation and were like, you know what? This is an opportunity for me to work with someone who's very talented. I don't know if I necessarily believe these allegations, and they are kind of, they are what they are. We talked about the Me Too and how there's a wide spectrum of what happened during Me Too. There was the Harvey Weinstein of it all, and then there was, you said something one time to a woman, and, now we're going to make a big deal about it and fire you over it, and everything in between, right? And so what Damashq said... He said, and remember, he was the head of the studio this time. He said that people had strong feelings and felt like it was the right thing to do, and they were excited to work with him. And he also said it's definitely not a black and white situation. So he's kind of leaning on the Lasseter side, saying, like, what you're hearing in the media, Variety, which is the trades paper, which we know is not owned by Disney, but like they are in the pocket of Disney. Disney says, hey, we need to... make this person look good or look bad, and then the trades will just go and do that because they want to keep their ins, they want to get their press credentials, and it's just kind of how the trades work, unfortunately. So I think it is a black and white situation. We may never know what happened, but it is what it is. And so then other people, namely a lot of Disney and Pixar people, start joining the ranks. Nathan Greno, he was hired to write and direct a film called Puku. We don't have a release date on that, but Nathan Greno, you might remember as one of the co-directors for Tangled. Mm-hmm. And he also, at the time, I believe, was working on Gigantic, which was the Jack and the Beanstalk film that ultimately got shelved. And we had release dates for this, and they had concept art. It was like a D23 big thing. Mm-hmm. 2016, it's coming out. No, it's 2018. 2020 was the last time we heard of an actual release date before it was ultimately shelved. And skipping forward, I think this is really interesting because there is now an untitled Jack and the Beanstalk project at Skydance Animation, which is going to be distributed by Netflix, which I'm like, this is so good.
Oh my gosh. Yes, the drama. So just side note, just as a side thing, I did go and do a tour of Disney Animation. And as I was like walking through, like I saw that there is a, like around the cereal area, they have another room that's like all enclosed in glass in the center. And you have like, it's a conference room. And so you can't hear anything that's happening inside, but it's like they had a TV with a giant logo of Giants on it. And I was just like, oh, I wonder if they're like making some kind of big decision. And it wasn't more than like a week or two later that they announced that it was no longer in production. I was like, oh, wow. Sad.
Wow. So anyways, I just thought that was very interesting because I'm not sure. I mean, he's working on this other film, but it's interesting to me that they're like, no, this is a really great story. Disney hasn't really tackled it yet other than Mickey and the Beanstalk. And it's public domain. It's a fairy tale. Why not? We're going to make a different version of it. I mean, obviously, John Lasseter was heavily involved in Gigantic because he was around up until 2018, so he was involved.
He's like,
he knows what was working, what wasn't. Yeah. Holly Edwards, she was promoted to be the president of Skydance Animation, basically right after Lasseter was announced. Then we have Shane Prigmore, who my ears prig up, if you will, when I hear that name, because he's the co-producer and co-creator of Tangled the series. And I love that series. I love everyone involved in it. And so I have interviewed his counterpart, Chris Sonnenberg, and I've always wondered, like, who is Shane Prigmore? I'd love to get to know more about him and like interview him and get a feel. But he, in June 2020, was hired as the SVP of development. And then Lauren Montgomery, she's the showrunner for something called Wandla, which is going to be an adaptation, a series. Brad Bird, February 2022. He joined to develop Ray Gun, which is a movie that he has long wanted to put in production since the 90s, since early, before The Iron Giant. And lots of people are interested in this, and it's finally maybe going to happen. So that's exciting. But at the same time, now Brad Bird has been yoinked back over to The Incredibles to do The Incredibles 3 at Pixar. So that is an interesting relationship because 2026 is when Ray Gun supposedly was supposed to come out. It might be bumped now. I don't know. But that's interesting because Disney is so desperate, it seems, to...
Well, Netflix has had a hard time because Ray Gun has been so expensive. And so there's a back and forth with that one. Which
yes,
will be an interesting
Will we see
thing.
it? Who knows? Yeah, maybe it is on hold until he's like, well, we got to really get this done. Rich Moore, he joined in March 2022. At least that's when it was announced. He's entered into a multi-year exclusive deal with Skydance Animation. And Rich Moore...
He liked one of my tweets once. It was a proud day.
It's always great when you get recognized by people in the industry.
I know. I was recognized.
You know him. He's an old Simpsons Futurama guy, and Wreck-It Ralph Breaks the Internet was his big things, and I think because I think he has history with like all the animation people like know each other, but especially like the Simpsons people and the Disney and Pixar. I feel like so it made sense for him to join along. Because I'm trying to look to see at Disney. So he is listed as the director for the Untitled Jack and the Beanstalk project. So that's interesting. But it seems that I'm trying to see if he had anything else that was maybe in development that got canceled. But it seems like Ralph Breaks the Internet and then Vivo, which came out on Netflix, was what he was a producer on, but not necessarily a director. So he's been involved. He's just working kind of all over the place. And right now he's found his home at Skydance. Bruce Anderson, May 2024, hired as head of production. And then the most recent is Don Hall, who joined in June 2024. He joined Disney Animation in 1999 with Tarzan and was, story, character design. Ultimately, he directed Winnie the Pooh, the 2011 Winnie the Pooh, which I wish I could go back and redo that episode because there's just so much... I love that movie even more than when I saw it. Like,
oh, really?
It's always on at my house, and I'm like, Jeremiah was right. This movie is so good. I need to give it... I can't remember what I gave it, like maybe a 3.5. Like, I need to give it a full half above because it's so good. It's so funny. I still don't love, like, Zooey Deschanel as the beginning, but everything else, like, it's so good. It's just so underrated. Anyways, tangent. Sorry about that. But he directed that. He directed Big Hero 6. Director for Raya the Last Dragon and Strange World. So, I mean, he had come up in the ranks and he really kind of started hitting his stride, like, in the second renaissance, if you will, with, Winnie the Pooh, which wasn't as big of a hit, but Big Hero 6 for sure was story writer or the story for Moana. And then, then he hits these, like, kind of like these duds, like, tunk, 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 with Raya and Strange World, which is unfortunate. He was also executive producer for Wish. It's like he was trying to do his best with what he had. And it just, I think we've talked about that at large, at what's going on with the studio and like the direction they wanted to do, which, proof's in the pudding. Right. So, wow, that is a lot in such a small amount of time. We're really, like we said, since 2017 that this has been a thing. But 2019, I think, really is when it's hitting its stride, when they get John in there and he starts really developing all these things. I read recently that their goal is to have 2 animated films a year, which seems very ambitious.
That's very ambitious, yes.
Considering they just recently in 2022 got their first one out and now it's 2024 and Spellbound's coming out. I think that, I don't know, I think when studios get into this 2-a-year cycle, it really becomes unsustainable after a certain point and quality goes down. So I hear that and I'm like, I don't know. I mean, are you ready for it? I don't think they're ready for that. I think, right now it's been 2 years. So like we said, they came out with a short film called Blush in October 2021. Then in August 2022, they came out with Luck. March 2023, they had a short relating to luck called Bad Luck Spot. And now we have Spellbound coming out November 22nd, 2024. But they have so many other films in the hopper, which will be interesting to pay attention to. It seems like we're going to get a yearly cadence from them. 2025, we have Puku, Nathan Greno attached as the director. Ray Gun is TBA with Brad Bird, obviously TBA since the recent announcements. Then we also have TBA, the untitled Jack and the Beanstalk project by Rich Moore. And lastly, Don Hall is doing an untitled Don Hall project. So Don Hall's like, yes, finally. It'll be interesting to see what they come out with. But another thing that we didn't talk about was their distribution model. And the distribution model had changed from when they initially were doing this and what they wanted to do with it. So initially these movies were going to be released theatrically, with Luck actually coming out in March, right around St. Patrick's Day, which is kind of, you think of like the lucky time of year, right? Because of that. But then in July 2020, it announced that Paramount was going to be with them. But actually, they had partnered with Paramount Animation as part of their deal with Skydance Animation. But Paramount Animation ended up pulling out. And it says, the president, Chris, he said, these films not only continue our long-standing relationship with Skydance, but along with Paramount Animation's own upcoming films, mean we'll be releasing event-level marketing animated films for years to come. So something happened with the partnership with Paramount Animation, which I forgot to even mention. But I think it happened with John Lasseter. I can't verify this. I can't find it specifically, but it seems like with John Lasseter on board, it all went under. We can see very quickly that Paramount exits and they bring on officially the Madrid studio. Like we absorb you and you become us. And so they're no longer necessarily needing to partner with Paramount Animation. They're able to make it work with what they had. So as a result of this, they kind of lost their distribution model, which I can't find a ton as to why. So December 2020, Apple TV enters the scene and then announces that they're going to release Luck and Spellbound on Apple TV Plus. It's so funny because Apple TV Plus, of all the streaming services, is like the weirdest one to me. I have absolutely no reason to join.
Right.
I look at their catalog and they're all like these Apple TV originals and I just don't care about them. You know, the Netflix model is they just became the hub for everyone else's stuff and slowly started introducing their own stuff. That you were like, oh, I'm already here and I already trust Netflix. Like, let's check this out. You know, so Apple TV Plus for me I've never really been drawn into their content because I'm not going to sign up just to like eagerly await whatever you might have. Like, it's such a, like, that is just taking a risk that I'm not willing to take. And so when I hear about a good one, you know, like Ted Lasso is like one of their big ones. And, you know, Luck like came out, but I didn't want to go out of my way to see Luck. So I didn't until just now. But something ended up happening later that they ended up not going to release Spellbound, and Spellbound is now going to be released by Netflix. So that was announced in October 2023 that Skydance signed a multi-year deal with Netflix. And the big theme in animation is the distribution. We, you know, talking about Don Bluth last week and just these newer studios that don't have their own distribution wing. That is the big hurdle. It's amazing that you want to create your own animated film. It's amazing that you want to like have these amazing stories and movies. But if you cannot get it distributed, you're dead upon arrival, right?
Yeah.
So here they are. They're at Netflix. I think that's significantly better for them than Apple TV Plus. But still, I mean, I'm thinking of Klaus. I'm thinking of Vivo, you know, as we were talking about. I'm like, oh yeah, that's on there, but I haven't gone to check it out. I'm thinking of all these other films that I'm just like, wow, cool movies. And they seem like cool concepts. But because they're on Netflix, I'm like, I'll get to it when I get to it. I don't go out of my way to watch even like Netflix originals right away when they come out. So,
well, there you go.
There we have it. That is Skydance Animation, and that is kind of a very sloppy version of it because there's so much going on. There's a lot of pieces. It's new. And they don't have a lot to, it's all press releases and news articles of things that haven't actually happened yet. So it's putting the pieces together, trying to figure out behind the scenes what's happening. It seems like they're in a good place. They have some really great people on board, people that are tried and true in the industry. They have good relationships with Lasseter, which I think that's one of the most important things at this part. Like if you're against him or you hate him, like this is not going to go over well.
Right.
So it seems like they have the right team and the machine is running. Now with Netflix, they don't really have to worry about the distribution as much. But at the same time, like I'd love to see these films do a theatrical release. I love going to theaters. And I think that's where you make your big impact still. Go to Netflix after the fact. I don't know. So Skydance Animation. Any thoughts, Chelsea? I'm sorry, this has kind of been the Morgan show because I've just been rattling off everything.
I'm listening to you and going through all of these things. Yes, they had huge successes with their live action catalog, and then now coming in, I feel like they really have built, as you mentioned, just a tried and true team. So it's like, if you're looking at, okay, what is the possibilities going forward? I think there's a lot of possibilities. They have a lot of good people on there that have all done all the things, So it's, you're not living in a land of, maybe if we get the right people, they all have a track record that are like a very good track record. So I do have high hopes for the projects that they're coming out with. I do see the problems with the Netflix or streaming model releases.
Chelsea likes Netflix releases a lot more than me. She's way on board and a believer in change. You're the progressive and I'm the conservative. We need to find the happy middle, right?
Right. In this case, yes. And I think more I believe in change for the little guy. And I think that having a streaming model is really good for the up and comer, for the people that are just getting in and trying to create a track record at all. Because it's so difficult to get into the theaters, I think that is its own issue. So I think that I like that there is a place for newbies and new talent to get in there. That being said, with people that are like this, we shall see. I hope eventually that they will find a really good avenue to be able to go more mainstream, because I agree with you that a mainstream outlet is the more traditional route through the theaters, because it does make more of a difference. It makes a difference when you have all the marketing budget behind you.
Right.
And so if you don't have the marketing budget behind you, then the easiest way to just get your foot in the door and get some type of viewership is the streaming model. So there's pros and cons, and it just kind of depends on where you're at. So until they're able to get more things done, I think that eventually they will move into once they get maybe the unnamed Jack and the Beanstalk film will finally...
I'm most excited about that one.
I know. Well, what would be crazy if they actually... I sincerely doubt that they would get the Lopez's to come in and redo the music or just start fresh on music stuff with that one, because they were on that, and that was interesting. That was a big thing, and so it will be interesting. So it's no longer a musical, I doubt, but hey, look at Spellbound. You got Alan Menken for the score, so who knows? And they even with luck they tried to bring in a musical number. So I just think it's I am just full of we shall see what you guys do.
Yeah, and speaking of Spellbound, that's Alan Menken doing the score, and then Alan Menken and Glenn Slater doing the songs, which are the Tangled duo, and Tangled the series, and they work well together. So
yeah,
I love this. I am very excited for a few weeks when we see Spellbound, and I will actually check it. I obviously get a screener beforehand, but if I wouldn't have, I feel like now everything I know about Skydance, more than just it just appeared out of nowhere, it makes me excited to see their films because of the people involved. They have a track record, and I trust it. So will Spellbound deliver? That is the question.
We shall see.
So thank you for joining us for this episode of the Animation Addicts podcast. Our next episode, we are going to review their first film, Luck. Will they get lucky with this one? You're going to have to subscribe to find out. Let us know in the comments what you think about Skydance Animation. Are you going to buy their stock? Are you going to sell their stock? Or are you going to wait and see? Go to rotoscopers.com/318 and let us know there. That's all we have for today. Until next time, we are the Rotoscopers. So I had to manually redo all my work, which is this is why I just do my own work.
Yeah. I don't know if these headphones are just not very good, but can you make sure that your audio is on the correct thing?
I have not checked yet. Let's see.
Have you noticed I'm gone old school with the curling?
I like it. What's not to love?
Yeah, your
hair is a lot longer than I recall.
Yeah, it thins. down at the end, but it goes down past, it's actually mermaid length now.
Mermaid length, nice.
Yes.
Okay, so this, hello. You don't notice any difference that I'm getting close to my microphone?
No, I
and,
definitely hear the
blowing it
difference.
out?
I just
Okay.
still think that I'm going to change these headphones because they're crap.
No, I hear that.
Oh, this is much better.
Ah, yes, good.
I'm pulling out my Sennheiser headphones. Them Germans, they know how to make them.
Indeed, they do.
Yeah, no, those. So these headphones I bought literally just to take with me if I did a wedding event, not a wedding event, but like a wedding expo, and I wanted to let people like hear some of my stuff. And I bought them for like $20 each. They look much better than they are, and I was just like, oh, they're out, so I'll grab those. And these ones I keep in like their nice little case. And so I was like, all right, we're gonna go all the way.
Nice.
Look at us. Yeah, I really like these boots, except for the fact that they hurt.
I wouldn't even risk it. I would not risk it.
I mean, they say they're size 9, which I am technically a size 9, but I also had to put, with all the boots that I wear, I have to put like good insoles in them because they're horrible most of the time. Or my feet are sensitive. And so I put these ones on now and I'm like, man, they're just so tight, which, I mean, my mom never wore these. So that's probably why they're still like in pristine condition and haven't been worn in, because like the bottoms of him are like clean, So I was like, that does not bode well for the first couple days of trying to wear these.
Well, you just push through it, or
I'll give it a couple days.
Yeah.
Because you wear them for about an hour or so a day and then give your feet a break. But at least that way they kind of help the leather expand. So we shall see. But they're so cute. They look really good. Anyway, she has a lot of those. And I'm just like, man, Mom, you gave me the wrong size feet.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Mama.
Lesson to be learned. ChatGPT lies. The robots lie.
They do. They're not here to help make your podcast better.
No.
Nope. Don't allow ChatGPT to be your research arm, because they're just going to send you down some fake news. Not here for it.
You've been listening to the Animation Addicts podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe and be sure to leave us a 5-star review. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you want to help spread the word, be sure to share the podcast with your friends on social media. Just don't forget to tag us at Rotoscopers on Instagram and use the hashtag AnimationAddicts. For all the links and full show notes for this episode, go to rotoscopers.com/podcast. Now, if you still can't get enough for your animation fix, be sure to subscribe to us on YouTube and visit rotoscopers.com for more animation news, reviews, and interviews. Thanks for listening.